Ladies and gentlemen, there are two kinds of stories. Those you can take to bed with you and then there's the other kind. Now our story tonight is the other kind.
How's it going? My name's 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑖𝑐. I'm here to review a movie for you. Wow, mainstream horror is kind of going through a weird phase right now. It's almost as if we're going through like a second wave of reboots and remakes. For example, you have all your classic horror films that, came out in the 70s and 80s, even 90s, with stuff like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Scream. The list goes on. And of course, some time passed, years passed, decades even. And then all of a sudden the 2000s came along, and then the 2000s was an interesting year for movies because it was a time where movie studios began remaking and rebooting all these classic movies, and they're like, hey, these are making a lot of money, let's take advantage of these properties that already exist and create these franchises of just more and more of these movies. But instead of making sequels, why don't we just remake them and reboot them as a means to accommodate with the modern day era and contemporary audiences? So in other words, let's tweak these a little bit so they're in tune with modern day culture. And before you know it, we started getting all of these remakes and reboots, starting with the 2003 remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then after that, boom, Rob Zombie's Halloween. 2007, they just kept coming, and then in 2009 we got the Friday the 13th remake slash reboot thing, and then after that we got Scream 4, which in and of itself is still a sequel, but it's still acts more like a reboot than it is like an actual sequel, since it's following new characters, again, in order to accommodate with the modern times. So all that shit happened, and then now it's 2022, and we have come to a time where we're starting to have reboots and remakes of the same franchises, except it's like a second wave of reboots and remakes. And now we have these new Halloween reboots, and then there's also the Child's Play reboot, and then a Scream, Scream 5, which again is still kind of more of a reboot than it is an actual sequel. The original films still exist in the universe of these newer movies, but a lot of these reboots that are coming out seem to be direct sequels to the original, so they're kind of disregarding all the sequels and all this stuff that was released up until this point. And so yeah, it's just a thing that's happening right now. It's a corporation. And so I wasn't too surprised when I heard that Netflix was releasing a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. So this movie kind of just came out, and then I was like, all right, I guess there's a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that I have to watch now. Let's just take a look at all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies that have come out since the original. You have the original 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yes, masterpiece. Arguably one of the greatest horror films of all time. And then you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is also directed by Tobe Hooper, who directed the original. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is an enigma. Like, it's such a strange movie. Almost kind of feels like it's parodying itself. In fact, I read that Tobe Hooper didn't really know where to go with the sequel, since, he felt like he said everything that he had to say with the original, and he felt like he couldn't really replicate that same tone of the original. So instead, he went into like a completely left field direction and said, all right, let's just make a full-on, satire of the slasher genre, and that's kind of what Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is. And then we have Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which was released in 1990, and yeah, this one's not very good. Not a lot of people talk about it because it's not even really worth talking about, so it's like whatever. And then we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, also known as The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I guess has two titles. I didn't know that, actually. That's weird. This was released in 1995, and yeah, this one is actually brought up probably more so than the third film in this franchise, and it's because it's just so fucking weird and wacky and wild. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey are in it, and it's just a fucking weird movie. All I really remember from that movie is that Leatherface is dressed like a woman. He's like a woman in that movie, which it's kind of funny. But then holy shit, 2003 comes along, and then that we finally get our first Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. It's an official remake, a movie that is remaking the original film and is not a straight up sequel like the other films that have been mentioned. This movie's actually gotten quite a cult following over the past few years. I hear out of all these horror remakes that have come out in this time period, this is one of the better ones. I haven't seen it probably since that time, so I need to rewatch it, but apparently it's pretty good. And then in 2006 we got a sequel to the 2003 Texas Chainsaw remake called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, which I guess is like a prequel, like the start of Leatherface and how he came to be Leatherface. 7 years later we get Texas Chainsaw 3D. I actually reviewed this movie back when it came out in 2013. Yeah, this movie kind of sucks ass. I remember not liking it very much, and I've kind of had no desire to go back to it, so yeah. And then in 2017 we had Leatherface, which is a movie I actually have not seen, because I didn't really care to see it. In fact, my family was watching it one night, and I just kind of came downstairs and watched a little bit of it, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I really need to see this movie. But oh fuck, now it's 2022, and we have now a second remake slash reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And before I say anything about this movie, I want to talk about the title, because the title is fucking horrible. The title of this film, if you can believe it, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So what happens 30-40 years from now when we're talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and we're like, wait, are you talking about the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or are you talking about the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre? And it really does nothing but cause confusion. And look, I know it's supposed to be like a direct sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is kind of what the new Halloween reboot is doing. That movie is also a direct sequel to the original. It kind of disregards everything that happened, before it. So I guess this one's doing the same thing. But anyways, yeah, shitty title. Whatever happened to movie titles? When did those stop being a thing? Look at the Hannibal Lecter franchise, First you had the Silence of the Lambs. Well, technically the first film was Manhunter, and then you had the Silence of the Lambs. Two completely different titles and two completely different movies that differentiate each other, and you can tell that they're different because the title is different. And then the sequel to the Silence of the Lambs was called Red Dragon, which, yeah, great title. And then the film after that is just called Hannibal, which is probably the least creative title out of any of them, but at least they all have different titles, and you can clearly distinguish, what each movie is because of the title. Why do we have like 3-4 different movies that are called Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Like, why does this keep happening? Anyways, I haven't even talked about the fucking movie yet. So yeah, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 about a couple days ago. I did not like this movie one bit. I did not like it at all. I am sorry, this movie sucked fucking balls. First and foremost, this movie went straight to Netflix, and it 100% feels like a movie that went straight to Netflix. This movie has no charm or personality to it, or really anything to make it, stand up above the rest and be like, hey, look at me, it's just, here it is on Netflix. It's just completely devoid of a soul and lacks any personality whatsoever. This film is directed by David Blue Garcia, who's a man I've never heard of before in my life, and I'm sure you haven't either, unless you're him watching this video, in which case I'm sorry. The movie was also surprisingly written by 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑼𝑗𝑗 Alvarez. 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝑃 Alvarez is actually the man responsible for writing and directing one of the better horror remakes to come out, which is the 2013 Evil Dead remake, which is also a film that's kind of gotten a cult following over the past few years, and people seem to really like that movie, so clearly this guy has a lot of talent. And the fact that he actually wrote this movie kind of baffles me. So what the fuck is this movie about? Well, I will do my damn best to tell you what this movie's about. The film takes place nearly 50 years after the events of the original film, meaning that Leatherface at this point in time is an old-ass fucking man. This is an elderly man just walking around wielding a chainsaw, which is kind of a funny concept. The movie follows a bunch of young entrepreneurs who are traveling to Harlow, which is an abandoned town in Texas, and here in Harlow, they are trying to auction off old properties so they can create a trendy, heavily gentrified area, whatever the fuck that means. It turns out that one of the properties they're trying to claim is actually still owned by this old lady and this man who live in this, house. And so they go to the house and they're like, hey, what the fuck? Why do you live here? And it turns out that she's just an old lady. Her name's Ginny. I don't know who the fuck this character is. Like, she just came out of nowhere. I looked it up. There was no Ginny in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In fact, the only grandma in that film was fucking dead. She was a dead body just sitting at the goddamn dinner table. So who the fuck is Ginny? Why is she here? Who is this character? And why should we even fucking care? I tried looking up if this character had any backstory on some like Texas Chainsaw Massacre wiki page, and it turns out that apparently the page for this movie is like in the process of deletion. So apparently like they don't even want this movie to be canon. Like I don't like what's fuck is going on? Hey, Jacob from the future here. Just wanted to stop by and fill in on some information that I may have missed. Apparently that this place that this old lady and Leatherface reside in is an orphanage, and Leatherface is her last little boy, meaning that Leatherface has been staying in this orphanage with this random ass lady, you know, for an unconfirmed amount of time. But that still doesn't really take away from the fact that she's kind of a pointless character and we're supposed to care about her dying, so my opinion still stands. Anyways, yeah, that's it. See ya. So anyways, they go to this old lady Ginny's house, and of course Leatherface is there, and he's just a big man who's just standing at the top of the stairs just staring down at him. This is the man who caused that killing spree. After all these years, he's just here living with this old lady. And then these Zoomers are like, hey, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? This is our property. And then the old lady's like, oh, well, you see, youngling, back in my day. And then all of a sudden, she just fucking plops to the floor and she just has a heart attack out of nowhere. Like, so then Ginny's just rushed to the hospital, and Leatherface is there, you know, in the back of the ambulance with Ginny, and he's like, no, don't die. This character we've never fucking seen before in our life. And then on the way to the hospital, Ginny unfortunately passes away, and Leatherface has fucking had it, man. He's fucking had it. He's back, baby. He's back to wield his chainsaw and kill people for no apparent fucking reason. So apparently, I mean, this guy hasn't gone on a killing spree in nearly 50 years, and this is the last straw. This is what fucking gets him going again. He's like, god damn it, fucking Ginny's dead. God, where the fuck is my chainsaw? And then he skins Ginny's face, and then he wears it, and it's, you know, as a way to say, oh, I'm back, baby. I'm Leatherface now. Meanwhile, 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑃 Fisher's character is, you know, back in the town with this man. And then we get a little bit of backstory with 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝑃 Fisher's character, because apparently she has a fear of guns, and she reveals that she is terrified of guns because she is actually a survivor of a school shooting. It's almost like the filmmakers were like, hey, what's going on in today's news? School shootings? That's happening a lot. And then there's this big bus, and then Leatherface comes onto the bus, and you know shit's about to go down when Leatherface is on a bus with, you know, a bunch of Zoomers. And what do these kids do when they first see Leatherface? They whip out their phones, and they start filming him. And then there's this one Asian guy who proudly proclaims,
try anything and you're canceled, bro.
that is a genuine, real line in this movie. And Leatherface proceeds to kill this man from the point of view of the live stream from the guy's phone. There's literally a shot where we are seeing from the point of view of the man's phone who's getting killed. You know, Leatherface just fucking him up. You see all the comments on the bottom, and it's like, oh my god, he's killing him. And then, yeah, something actually kind of cool happens for once, where, you know, Leatherface starts killing all these people. And the scene's kind of cool because, you know, Leatherface is just in this bus, and he's actually committing a massacre, and he's killing all these unlikable characters. But then immediately after this scene, the movie just kind of goes back to being really fucking stupid. And then all of a sudden, out of fucking nowhere, in the middle of the movie, we are introduced to 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑃. Is that how you pronounce her last name? Sure, that's sure. Yes, you heard that right, you fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre nerds. 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝑃 is in this movie. The main character, the final girl from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not the same actress, but the same character, is back in this new film. This is truly a reboot, a direct sequel to the original film. This is the one that needs to be put on the same pedestal as the original movie, because they have the main character in it. They have the main character of the original movie in here. She's back. She's better than ever. Anyways, yeah, Sally's back in this movie, and she's an old-ass lady, and she's actually the sheriff of this town. She's still in the same exact town where all of her friends were massacred all those years ago, and there's a scene where she's in her truck, and she keeps an old photo of all of her friends that died that one fateful day, you know, before the massacre. And then she hears that people are dying, and she's like, oh, fuck, Leatherface is back. Finally, my time is now. My time is here. Anyways, 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝑃 Fisher's character, I guess, has a change of heart because she now is not afraid to use a gun, and she's like, yeah, actually, this shit's fucking cool. I love using a gun. And then she starts to hunt down Leatherface, and then all of a sudden, oh shit, Sally shows up in the middle of the climactic scene towards the end of the film. She shows up in her truck, and she's like, fuck you, man. I'm back. Do you remember me after all these years? Well, guess what? And then Leatherface just kind of walks up to her and he fucking kills her with this chainsaw. That's... Her character literally shows up in this movie for 5 fucking minutes total, and you know, just to be like, hey, I'm that character from the original movie, and then she just dies. Like, there's no development to this character whatsoever. That'd be like if Jamie Lee Curtis's character showed up in the 2018 Halloween reboot, and she just showed up for 5 minutes without any sort of acknowledgement to her significance as a character, you know, in this franchise, and she just kicks the fucking bucket. But no, instead the 2018 Halloween reboot, it actually decides to develop her character and to show you what's been going on with her all these years and how the events in the original Halloween film has affected her. Here we don't get that at all. Here we just get Sally's character and she's like,
yeah, I'm the sheriff of town now, at this town that my friends died all 50 years ago, and I'm back and I'm gonna kill this.
Okay, I need to take a breather because I have been talking about this movie for nearly an hour now, and I'm gonna stop there. Point being, there's no love in this movie. There's little to no acknowledgement of what made the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie so great, you know, as a staple of the horror genre. This feels less like a movie and more like a property that was made by, you know, these white dudes in suits who are just trying to make money off of another popular horror franchise and appeal to the modern audience by including all of these modern trends. And I don't care what anybody says, but this is not Leatherface. I don't know who the fuck this is, but that's not Leatherface. This is not the character that I've known and loved for years. You know, this is not the same guy. It feels like there's no understanding of who Leatherface is as a character. For example, in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, you have this woman just walking around in this house, and then all of a sudden, Leatherface just appears out of fucking nowhere. He just barges through this door, and this poor woman, you know, just frantically runs outside, and Leatherface chases her and he grabs her before she can escape, and he takes her back inside and she's screaming and squealing. He just puts her on a fucking meat hook and you're like, god damn, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is this guy's problem? That is how Leatherface as a character was introduced in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. He is a chainsaw wielding fucking maniac. There's a lot of ambiguity to his character, which makes him much more intimidating. The feeling of watching that scene for the very first time is something that I don't think can possibly be replicated, you know, ever. And you're telling me that the Leatherface in this movie is that same guy? No. This character feels less like a human being and more just like a commercial property with, again, no depth to him. There's nothing for us there to grasp onto, and that's really unfortunate. One of the only things that I liked about this movie is this shot right here. This shot of Leatherface just peeking through this field. It's a really interesting shot, and I like it. He's just a guy staring at you through this field, and he's menacing, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up now. This movie overall is easily the worst film in the entire Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Like, at least The Next Generation is somewhat amusing and funny and silly, and even Texas Chainsaw 3D that came out in 2013 with 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑼𝑑 Daddario. At least that movie had this scene in it.
Stop the fucking door! Then drop that! Put it down!
It also has 𝙒𝙃𝘼𝘼𝘼𝘼𝑼𝑑 Daddario just throwing a chainsaw to her cousin, and she's like, do your thing, cuz.
Do your thing, cuz.
Everybody remembers that line. It's a horrible line, but at the very least, it's fucking funny. It's really funny that even happened. Here we just have a dude, and he's filming Leatherface, and he's like,
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
and it's like, oh my god, what the fuck happened? Even the merchandise that was released for this movie is fucking horrific. Like, look at these shirts. Look at this shirt. Like, who the fuck? Why the fuck would you even wear that? Like, what the fuck is that? Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 Netflix film is getting a 2 out of 10 for me. A 2 out of 10. 2 out of 10. This movie sucked. Everything about it sucked. This shot is pretty cool, but everything else sucked. And at the very, very least, I hope that this movie can encourage this new generation, you know, of kids who have never seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie to go out and actually watch the old 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, because it is honestly one of the best horror movies ever made. And the fact that this movie, you know, exists in that same franchise is just baffling to me. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the very end of this review. I had a lot of fun making it. That's it. I'm done. Stay tuned for more videos coming in the very near future, and I will see you guys